We've been in a series, and this is week 4 of a series that we've been in called Hello, My Name Is. And we've been looking at the different names of God that were used in the Bible. And for those of you that have been here throughout these last few weeks, I hope that you have seen this series be powerful in your life just as it has in ours, as we have studied and we've really tried to articulate how powerful these names of God are in the Bible. You know, we've studied these names and we've come to see that God is not just this distant deity, but he's a personal, present, and powerful God who reveals his character and his nature through his names. Over the course of the last few weeks, these are the names that we've looked at. We've looked at Yahweh, the self-existent, covenant-keeping God. We looked at Abba, our loving Father. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord is our provider. Jehovah Rapha, the God who heals. We looked at last week, Jehovah Mekadesh, the Lord that sanctifies, as well as Jehovah Sidkenu, the God who is our righteousness. And each of these names have given us a deeper understanding of who God is and how he interacts with his people and what it means to fully trust him. So what I want to do today is I want to introduce us to 2 more names that reveal God as our protector and a warrior, the one who fights for us and with us. That's Jehovah Nissi, the Lord our banner, our victory in battles of life, as well as Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts, the commander of heaven's armies. You know, we live in a world filled with spiritual battles, challenges, and unseen warfare. I know that some of you walked into this place carrying battles that no one may never see. Battles within your mind, battles within your families. Maybe it's a workplace issue that you have going on. Maybe you're wrestling with your own faith. But I want you to know that today that you are not fighting alone. Because the God we serve is both our banner of victory and our commander of heaven's armies. And when we lift our eyes and we place them on him, we realize that the battle is not just ours, but the battle is actually the Lord's. And so that's what we want to do. We want to dive into these 2 powerful names. And I pray that your faith will rise, that your confidence will grow, and that you'll leave here today knowing that no matter what battle you face, that God fights for you. And that brings some comfort if we really process that our God fights on behalf of us. And so it shifts the paradigm of where we stand. And we know that when we know who God is, we'll know how to stand in every battle. That we will begin to understand that no matter what battle we face, God is with you. So let's take a look at the very first name. That is Jehovah Nissi, the Lord my banner. But what does that really mean? Like we talked about, Jehovah Jireh, my provider. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals. And we get that. We understand that the Lord provides, and we understand that the Lord can heal. But when it comes to Jehovah Nissi, like the Lord is my banner? Like what is that? Like it kind of sounds poetic in a sense and symbolic, but why would God specifically choose to reveal himself with this name? Why is a banner so important that it becomes a part of his identity? Well, the key is a banner or a Nissi is a flag. It's a symbol that they would use in military standards or nations, that they would lift high and would create an identity of where you belonged or where you were coming from. And so when we look at this idea that Jehovah is a Nissi, like the Lord is my banner, it's what we are lifting high and proclaiming. We're prioritizing a place from where we fight from. You see, a banner is a powerful symbol that represents a few things. Number one, it represents an identity. It tells everyone who we are and whose we are. When the banner is raised, it declares an allegiance to who you stand with and who you belong to. Think about the Olympics, right? The Summer Olympics just happened. I know now they're getting ready for the Winter Olympics. When the opening ceremonies take place, you see all of these nations come together from around the world, and they proudly march in, waving their flag. And that flag represents where they're from, who they belong to, and what they stand for. And then what happens when that athlete from that nation wins the gold medal? Usually they run over to the side, right? They grab the flag, they're waving in the air, they wrap themselves in it. And it's not just about winning. It's about a declaration in this moment of identity. That the flag would tell the world, this is who I am, this is the country that I represent, and this is where my victory comes from. A banner represents our identity. The second thing is a banner rallies people together. There's something about a visible symbol that brings people together under a common purpose. You see, throughout history, people have raised banners to represent causes, movements, or allegiances. You can think about it. You think about maybe protests that happen within the streets. You could think about marches that go on. Usually they have a banner and people are marching behind it. They're waving flags in the air saying, this is what we stand for. This is what we represent. They've got poster boards that have sayings that represent what they are marching for. What about military? All throughout history, people have marched under a standard or a flag that represents their kingdom. And even in every single day life, we use symbols and logos and signs that let people know what we support and where our loyalties lie. So a banner rallies people together. The third thing is a banner declares victory. When a battle's won, a banner's lifted high. It's a sign of triumph. It's a public declaration that the fight has been won and the victor reigns. This is why Jehovah Nissi matters. When we say the Lord is my banner, we're saying I know where my identity lies. I know who is covering me. I know what I stand for and where I fight from. Like when I walk in victory, I'm carrying his name. You see, Jehovah Nissi isn't just a nice title, but it's a powerful truth that shapes how we fight our battles. You see, we don't fight for victory, as I said last week, but we fight from victory under the banner of Jehovah Nissi. The Lord is our banner. So, real quick, let's take a look at where this name is actually referenced for the very first time. It's found in Exodus chapter 17, and it comes in a moment when God's people are about to face their very first real battle after leaving Egypt. It's found in Exodus 17, starting in verse 8. It says, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out and fight the Amalekites. Now, this is interesting because, again, now Israel has been in slavery and bondage for over 400 years. Like they're workers, like they're not fighters. They're not an army. They're just people that have been driven to build bricks and to bring homes and they've been doing the work of Egypt. They're not a military group. And so now all of a sudden, Joshua comes onto the scene. This is the first time that Joshua's name is mentioned. And Moses says, Joshua, I want you to get some men and you're going to go fight. And so this is what happens. It says Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses ordered, and Moses and Aaron and Hur went to the top of the hill. And as long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. Can you humor me for a second, okay? Could you just lift up your hands just like this? Perfect. Just keep them up, okay, while I read this. Just keep them there. Hey, you know this battle was 13 hours, so we can do it just for a minute. Let me just read this. Let's just kind of just feel what this feels like. But whenever he lowered, no, I'm just joking. I'll read it faster. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. But when Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone, placed it under him, and they sat on it. Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, and to make sure Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of the Amalekite under heaven. Moses built an altar and called it, "The Lord is my banner." Half of the group, put your hands down. Man, we're in trouble if we're going to war. You can put them down. We're in trouble. Got tired. I'm tired already. Again, the context is Israel's fresh out of Egypt, barely knowing how to fight. The Amalekites show up and they start attacking the Israelites. And it's interesting because really the Amalekites were cousins of the Israelites. Amalek, who was the king of the Amalekites, was actually Esau's grandson. And we know that Israel came from Jacob. And so we have these nations that are warring against each other. The Amalekites, you'll see all throughout the Old Testament, is this nemesis, this thorn in Israel's side. And actually, the Amalekites is a type and shadow of what the enemy does. We know that his objective is to steal, kill, and destroy. And what we see all throughout the Old Testament is the Amalekites they wouldn't fight you head on. They would ambush you. They would attack you when you were weak, when you were weary, when you were tired. They would try to discourage you. And I really do think it's the exact same picture of what the enemy tries to do in our lives. When you're tired, when you're weak, when you feel like you have no strength, that's when the enemy comes and tries to deter you and tries to speak lies over your life and discourage you in these moments. And so it's important that we understand within this battle that the Lord is our banner. Again, we saw that within this story, what would happen is that Moses would go up on the hill and he found himself raising a staff. Look at this. I got a staff right here. Convenient. He would raise the staff. And every time that staff would come down, you know what? I need a Moses. Brian, would you just join me up here real quick? Come on. And it's not because of the beard works. It actually works really good. Thank you. Could you just hold that up there? The whole service. Perfect. Okay. Since they couldn't do it, we're appointing you to be able to hold it up the whole service. Okay, there we go. So as the staff was up, they would win. But as his arms were getting tired, it says that the Amalekites would begin to win. And I love it because he was with two other people, Aaron and Hur. And so when they saw that Moses' arms were getting tired and they were getting weak, they used common sense. Like the Lord didn't tell Aaron and Hur what to do. Like they saw that his arms were trembling and they needed some support. So it says that they rolled over a rock. I need some help. Shane, will you just help me? You're just the closest right there. Taya, will you help me too? Will you bring that chair with you? Bring the chair up here. Bring the chair. Come on. Here we go. Quickly. It says they put the rock there and then they would sit down. Go ahead and sit down. They set him down because it gave him a little bit more strength. But as his arms were getting tired, go ahead and put that up there. They would hold each arm. And as they would hold that arm up, it gave them enough strength to continue to keep the staff lifted high so the Israelites could win the battle. Couple key truths that we need to understand within this story is that your victory is found under God's banner. And too often we find ourselves fighting our battles in our own strength, trying to fix our own problems, control our outcomes, and push through the difficulties by just sheer willpower. Like, I'll just do it myself. But we exhaust ourselves when we fight in our own strength. We grow weary. We get discouraged because we forget that what we find out is that victory is not ours to achieve, but it's God's to give. And we have to understand that victory is found underneath God's banner of Jehovah Nissi, his covering where our identity is found. You see, victory doesn't come from fighting harder. It comes from you staying underneath his covering. But too many times we think, well, we're just going to do it our own strength. But the battle plan really that is at hand is saying, God, I'm under your covering, your identity, your strength. Psalms 25 says, we will shout for joy when we are victorious and we will lift up our banners in the name of our God. The second thing is that your posture determines your victory. When we step into battle, sometimes it's clenched fists, like we're going to duke it out, like I'm just going to go for it. But what happens if we took on the proper posture of surrendered hands instead of clenched fists? You see, in life, our posture, both physically and spiritually, determines our victory. When Moses stood on that hill with his hands lifted, the Israelites prevailed, as he said. But when his arms grew weary, but as you can see, he has the support, so it's not growing weary. We would see that when they were weary, the enemy would gain ground. But his posture was not just a physical act, but a spiritual declaration of his dependence on God. It was that reminder that the battle was not by his strength, strategy, or skill, but the surrender to the Lord's power. Again, many of us, we face battles feeling exhausted because we're standing in the wrong posture. We're standing in the posture of striving instead of surrendering. We're standing in the posture of worrying all the time instead of worshiping. We're standing in this posture of fighting in our own strength instead of lifting our hands in faith. You see, victory comes when we assume a posture of trust, prayer, and reliance to God. Your worship, your prayer, your surrender determine the strength within your battle. Lifted hands saying, God, I'm surrendering this to you. I'm giving you control. And sometimes, depending on the paradigm of how you grew up in church, or maybe you never grew up in church, sometimes when you see in worship, like the lifting up of hands seems kind of odd to you. Maybe very charismatic for you. Like, why are they lifting their hands? Like, what is this? Again, this is a sign of a posture of worship saying, God, I'm surrendering it to you. God, you are my banner. I love what 1 Timothy 2:8 says. It says, I desire that every place men should pray, lifting up holy hands. Like we're lifting up holy hands. God, I give this battle to you. God, I'm fighting underneath your banner. My identity is found from here, and I fight from a place of knowing who I am. And the third one is that you need people to hold up your hands, just as Shane and Tyler are doing for Brian. You see, Moses couldn't do it alone. He needed an Aaron and a Hur. Can I say that some of you, maybe you're losing your battles in life right now because you're fighting alone. You're fighting alone, trying to do it yourself. Ecclesiastes 4:9 says, two are better than one. If either of them falls, one can help the other up. So here's my question for you. Who's holding up your hands? Who are your Aaron and Hur? Like that's why church community is so important. The way that we get involved, whether it be in serving or just going to a community dinner to get to know people so that we can link arms so that when one gets tired, there's another one to hold the arms up so that we can continue to fight the battle the way that the Lord calls us to fight. Question is, are you fighting in your own strength? Are you fighting under Jehovah Nissi? You guys can be seated. Thank you guys so much. Can we give them a hand right there? But can I just tell you that oftentimes this is the banner that we fly. That we're standing under fear and anxiety, depression, guilt. And this is the banner that we're flying. Again, a banner represents an identity, a place from where we identify with. And I think too many people are fighting their battles with this mindset. It's like, I don't know what the Lord's going to do. And you find yourself fearful. You find yourself worried all the time. And can I tell you that we're never going to win the battle if we're fighting under this? My challenge to you today is to think about, what banner are you flying? Are you flying under Jehovah Nissi, the one that says, the Lord is my banner, my strength, where my identity comes from, where I know where I'm fighting from, this place that he has already won? Or do I find myself struggling and lifting up all of these other things and find myself constantly under fear and oppression? Jehovah Nissi, when we understand that powerful name, we begin to understand what he begins to do in and through our life. The second name, real quickly, that I want to just talk about because it's just as important, is that it leads us to this name, Jehovah Sabaoth, which is the Lord of hosts. If Jehovah Nissi reminds us that we fight under his banner, then Jehovah Sabaoth reminds us who is actually fighting for us. You see, this name reveals God as the commander of heaven's army, the one who fights on behalf of his people. But let's be honest, sometimes we do feel outnumbered. Oftentimes the battle does look like it's too big, too overwhelming, too impossible. But when we understand that he is Jehovah Sabaoth, we realize that we are never fighting alone. You know, this name is referenced over 270 times in the Bible. And the first time that Jehovah Sabaoth is mentioned, it's found in 1 Samuel chapter 1. And it's interesting how this name actually shows up for the very first time, because it was in a moment of personal struggle, not a military battle. This struggle is Hannah. She's married to this man, Elkanah, and he has two wives, and one wife has been able to have sons and many sons, and Hannah is barren, and she's desperate, and she's crying out that the Lord would hear her cries to grant her a child. And so Hannah is suffering from infertility, and she calls upon Jehovah Sabaoth in her depression. And I think this is crucial because battles aren't just physical, but they are spiritual, they're emotional, and they're personal. Jehovah Sabaoth fights for those who feel forgotten, weak, and under attack. And I think many of us could find ourselves in one of those stages at some point where we feel weak, forgotten, and attacked. And I want to tell you that when you call upon this name, Jehovah Sabaoth, you realize that he begins to strengthen and fight on your behalf. You see, this reminder is that God isn't just the Lord of armies. He's the Lord of the broken, the weary, and the desperate. Second thing that we understand about this name is the power of Jehovah Sabaoth in battle. You see, it was introduced the very first time in Hannah's story, but it's most famously connected to one of the most well-known battles in the Bible, David and Goliath. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, 45, David stands before the giant Goliath and he declares, he says, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, Jehovah Sabaoth, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." You see, David understood something that the Israelites didn't. Victory doesn't come from human strength or weapons. It comes from the Lord of hosts, the commander of the armies. The battle was not his to fight. It belonged to Jehovah. And what's powerful about this moment is the entire Israelite nation had been paralyzed for over 40 days, hearing Goliath come out with these rants and challenging them to come and fight them. But David knew the truth that Jehovah Sabaoth fights for you, and no enemy can stand against that. The third thing is that Jehovah, he stands in times of crisis. You see, this name just isn't about a literal warfare, but it speaks to spiritual battles, impossible situations, and overwhelming odds. We see throughout the Old Testament, there are a few examples how Jehovah Sabaoth shows up when his people are in trouble. One of the times is in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and I don't have time to go into all of these stories in detail, but some of these are familiar to you, but I just wanted to remind you about them. In 2 Chronicles chapter 20, there's a vast army that's coming against the nation of Judah and King Jehoshaphat. There's 3 armies coming to attack Judah, and he doesn't know what to do. He's afraid, and instead of rushing into battle just to fight on his own strength, he calls for the people to fast and pray. And this is what I love in 2 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 15. It says that the battle is not yours, but God's. And so he has the worship team go out before the military army in the battle. And they begin to worship and sing. I don't know if you were on the worship team that day. You might have hit X on the planning center. I don't know if I'm ready for that one. Like, maybe I'll do next week, okay? But, it's like that. They sent the worshipers out. And when they began to worship, it says that the enemy became so confused that they turned on each other and destroyed each other. You see, when we trust in Jehovah Sabaoth, we don't fight alone. He fights for us. Another story is found in 2 Kings chapter 6. The prophet Elijah, there's a king that's really mad at Elijah because he keeps telling the nation of Israel, hey, watch out, don't go over there. They're going to ambush you here. Don't go over there. There's an army over there. And so the king is so mad. And so they tell people, go find where Elijah is at. And I want you to destroy him. And so we see in 2 Kings chapter 6 that as they wake up one morning, the servant goes out. Elisha's servant goes out and he sees this army surrounding them. And he says, well, what are we going to do? And Elisha prayed, said, Lord, open his eyes, talking about his servant. And suddenly his servant saw an army that surrounded, an army of chariots surrounding the army that was surrounding them. You see, Jehovah Sabaoth commands the armies of heaven. And when we're in a battle, we are never outnumbered. So what does this mean for us today? The battles that we face might not always be physical, but they are just as real. We fight against fear. We fight against doubt, insecurity, temptation, discouragement, spiritual attack. And the good news is that we don't fight alone because Jehovah Sabaoth is with us. We're never outnumbered because heaven's armies stand behind us. And the battle's not ours. It belongs to the Lord. So what are you facing today? A battle in your mind? A struggle in your family? A situation that just seems impossible? Remember, he's Jehovah Nissi who gives us our banner, where our identity and our confidence lie. But he's also Jehovah Sabaoth who wins the war. So the question is, whose banner are you under? And where are you getting the power to fight with? If you're fighting alone, you'll be exhausted. If you're trusting in your own strength, you'll feel overwhelmed. But if you're standing under Jehovah Nissi and trusting in Jehovah Sabaoth, you can walk in victory today. God's calling us to stop fighting in our own strength, but to trust the Lord of hosts this morning. Can I just give us a few practical takeaways for today? Number one, why don't we lift high the banner of the Lord? He is Jehovah Nissi. He is our banner. Let's use worship as a weapon to raise our hands, to lift our voice, to declare victory. Trust the Lord of hosts to fight for you. Stop fighting the battle that belongs to God. And the third thing is equip yourself for spiritual battle, because it's real. There is an enemy, and he has a plan. God has a plan for your life, but the enemy has a plan as well. And he doesn't play fair. So we need to equip ourselves for battle. Put on the armor of God. Pray in faith. Get in community. Surround yourselves with Aaron and hers that can begin to raise your hands high. So when you're in the midst of the battle, you will not grow weary and tired.